We've mapped the psyche, explored probable selves, changed the past, traced events back to Framework 2, mastered the dream laboratory. But I keep coming back to Seth's phrase, value fulfillment. It sounds beautiful, but what does it actually mean for my daily choices? How do I know if I'm fulfilling my unique value or just chasing ego goals?
Value fulfillment is the yearning to enhance the quality of life as a fundamental desire in all life forms.
Wow. Okay, yeah, that is quite the definition to drop right at the start.
Right. I mean, it sounds almost like poetry on its surface, but today we are going to take that exact definition and really put it under the microscope. We're subjecting it to absolute rigorous scrutiny.
Which is exactly what we need, because otherwise it just stays this abstract, lofty idea. We want to ground it entirely in the friction of daily reality.
Exactly. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore value fulfillment as your ultimate built-in inner compass. We want to help you figure out how to use it for a truly meaningful, flowing life.
And we should clarify, we're drawing strictly from Jane Roberts' channeled Seth material for this. We are focusing heavily on dreams, evolution, and value fulfillment, obviously, but also the way toward health and the magical approach.
Yeah, those three texts are our foundation today. We're using them to help you, the listener, understand how to actually align your everyday choices with your absolute deepest impulses.
Because honestly, I am so ready to pull this apart. That opening quote you read completely shifts the foundation of everything we've been building so far.
It really does. It moves us past the mechanics and into the engine itself.
Right. I mean, we spent hours in these previous deep dives dissecting the architecture of consciousness. We know that beliefs construct physical experience.
We know the dream state sets up the waking state. Yeah.
Exactly. But mastering all those mechanics without understanding value fulfillment is like, it's like learning the thermodynamic principles of a combustion engine, building the whole car, and then just sitting in your driveway.
That's a perfect analogy. The machinery works perfectly, but the intent, like the destination, is totally missing.
And what Seth is suggesting here is that we don't have to agonize over the destination. The map isn't something we have to invent out of thin air. It's actually structurally integrated into the vehicle itself.
Integrated down to the smallest conceivable particle. I mean,
Yeah.
to even begin to understand this map, we have to look at Seth's diagnosis of reality at its most microscopic foundational level.
Right, taking it all the way down.
Yeah, we have to strip away the macroscopic world of, cars and driveways and human ambition. We have to look at what Seth calls the unit of consciousness, or the CU.
The CU. Okay, so this is the bedrock of value fulfillment.
It absolutely is. Seth teaches that every single unit of consciousness, whether it's currently cooperating to form a microscopic cell in the lining of your stomach, or a leaf on an oak tree outside, or even a swirling mass in a distant galaxy, has an innate built-in impulse.
An impulse to do what exactly?
To express its unique nature. It possesses this intrinsic, powerful drive to become more fully what it is. It's not just some passive building block waiting to be acted upon by external physical forces.
Which, I mean, that fundamentally contradicts the way most of us were taught to view the universe.
Oh, completely. It turns traditional physics on its head.
Because we're handed this sterile, billiard ball model of physics. The universe is just dead matter, inert dust floating in a void, occasionally crashing into things in ways that accidentally produce complex biological machines.
Right, the whole accidental universe theory.
Yeah, and then maybe, if the biological machine gets complex enough, consciousness flickers on like a light bulb. But Seth calls that out as a massive distortion, doesn't he?
A huge distortion. He insists that these CUs are awareized energy. They are not the result of physical matter. They are the cause of it.
They are the cause. Wow.
Because we know from Seth that consciousness precedes matter, right? The old model is entirely backwards. The universe isn't a machine made of dead parts. All energy contains consciousness.
That is the fundamental heresy that Seth introduces.
It is. The CU possesses its own inclinations, its own leanings. Seth describes it as having a profound inborn propensity for organization.
So they want to group together.
Exactly. They're fundamentally social. They seek to combine, to cooperate, to experience more of themselves through new configurations. But the mechanism of how this actually happens, that is where we see value fulfillment in action.
Okay, break that down for me. Because if a CU is non-physical, awareized energy floating in, say, Framework 2, how does it become the physical wood of the desk I'm leaning on right now, or the tissue of a human heart?
It happens through an explosive spark of primal desire.
Primal desire for a particle.
Yes, the CU doesn't just casually drift across the border into physical reality, it literally magnifies its own intent to be. Think of it less like building a structure with bricks and more like, well, like the phase shift of water turning into ice.
Okay, I follow. The underlying substance is the same.
Right, the underlying energy doesn't change, but the desire for a new state, for a new experience of value fulfillment, shifts its actual state of being.
That is wild.
The CU works up this incredible internal tension. It's a yearning to express a specific, unique quality of itself in a concrete way, and it literally breaches the threshold, exploding into physical materialization.
And when it crosses that line, Seth calls it an EE unit, right? An electromagnetic energy unit.
You got it. Those EE units then form the physical particles we recognize in a lab, but the sheer force that pushes them across the threshold, the actual fuel for physical materialization itself, is that agonizingly beautiful desire for value fulfillment.
Man, that reframes the very existence of matter. The universe is just constantly boiling over into physical reality purely out of a desire to experience its own qualities.
That's exactly what's happening.
So the desk, the tree, the human body, they're all physical manifestations of an intense psychological desire to exist.
Yes, and if we zoom back out to the listener tuning in right now, I mean, this ceases to be abstract quantum theory really quickly.
Because it's us. It's our bodies.
Exactly. This is the literal fabric of your body. The cells forming your nervous system, the neurons firing right now to decode the audio waves of this conversation, they are all fueled by this primal desire to be.
They aren't just mechanical pumps. They are tiny bursts of consciousness actively seeking their own fulfillment.
The fundamental creative impulse of all that is expressing itself through you constantly in every single millisecond. You are not some secondary accidental byproduct of a mechanical universe.
Right. You are the universe intimately expressing its own value fulfillment through a highly specialized lens.
Your existence is a purposeful thrust of energy. And recognizing this completely obliterates the traditional Darwinian view of how life evolves on this planet.
I really want to dig into that because Darwin's survival of the fittest is so deeply embedded in our cultural psyche.
Yeah.
We're told that nature is this grim, hyper-competitive slaughterhouse.
Oh, absolutely. It's taught as an endless scramble away from death.
Yeah, like a biological game of musical chairs where the only goal is to not be the one left without a seat when the music stops. It's entirely based on avoidance. Extinction is the threat, and mere survival is the only victory.
And Seth takes that grim paradigm and just dismantles it completely. He points out a glaring logical flaw in that model.
Which is?
Well, if nature were only concerned with bare survival, we wouldn't have a world of such staggering, unnecessary beauty and complexity. Bare survival doesn't require the peacock's tail.
Right, or the complex harmonies of birdsong.
Or the human capacity to write poetry or compose symphonies. Survival alone is an insufficient fuel for the magnificent, sprawling complexity of the universe.
So what is the fuel?
Seth tells us that nature is not fleeing from death. It is exuberantly, rambunctiously seeking pleasure.
Rambunctiously seeks pleasure. I love that. That phrase changes the entire atmospheric pressure of biology. It means the driving force of evolution isn't fear at all.
No, it's an innate pull toward joy. It's a consciousness-driven sprint toward quality.
A sprint toward quality.
Yeah, nature seeks to satisfy its needs by following its pleasure. There is a desire toward quality that acknowledges the affirming characteristics of pleasure itself. Even at the microscopic level, cellular mitosis isn't just a mechanical division.
Right. In Seth's framework, it's a cooperative, expansive, and fundamentally pleasurable act for the cells involved.
Exactly. The reaching of a leaf toward the sunlight is a hedonistic act. Life wants to feel itself living, and it wants to feel itself living well.
Which brings to mind the analogy Jane Roberts dictated when she was outlining the introductory concepts for dreams, evolution, and value fulfillment. She used that metaphor of the Olympic torch to explain how humans specifically interact with this concept.
That is one of my favorite analogies in the entire material.
Because survival of the fittest suggests we just take the torch of life, hold on to it for dear life, and try to pass it to the next generation before we drop dead, just keeping the flame identical.
Right, like we're just couriers of a static flame. We just endure a lifespan to ensure the species doesn't blink out of existence. But Jane noted that we each add something to that living torch.
We change the flame itself.
We do. We add a power, a specific meaning, and a quality to that flame that is entirely our own. We do this as individuals, through our art, our relationships, our unique ways of solving problems, our humor.
And in doing so, we enrich the entire psychic and physical bank of the species.
Yes. Value fulfillment means that you are alive specifically to add to the very quality of life itself in a way no one else can.
But let's bring this down to the pavement for a second.
Okay, let's do it.
Because I hear rambunctious pursuit of pleasure and adding unique quality to the living torch, and part of my brain lights up. It sounds incredibly liberating.
Yeah.
But the other part of my brain, the part that has to wake up on Tuesday morning, deal with a difficult client, pay the mortgage, and navigate a complex social structure, feels completely disconnected from that.
Sure, the day-to-day grind.
Yeah. What does this internal GPS of value fulfillment actually look like for a human being in the modern world?
Well, for a human being, value fulfillment is the spontaneous impulse that rises up from within you, guiding you toward actions that enhance your unique quality of life.
Okay, so it's a feeling.
It means aligning your daily choices, your work, your relationships, and your creative expressions with your deepest curiosities and your natural talents. It is the pull toward the things that make you lose track of time.
Right, that flow state.
Exactly. When you align with this impulse, your daily life, even when it involves hard work, feels energized. It feels purposeful. The friction decreases, and you enter a state of flow because you are literally moving in the same direction as the conscious energy forming your body.
And when we ignore it, because let's be honest, most of us are highly trained to ignore it. We are taught to sit still in classrooms, to pursue sensible careers, to silence our spontaneous impulses because they are viewed as impractical or childish.
And that conditioning has real consequences. When you systematically ignore this impulse in favor of what society dictates you should do, or when you let fear and the desperate need for security govern your choices, you sever your connection to that fundamental energy source.
You literally cut yourself off from the fuel.
You do. You feel drained, lethargic, stuck, and deeply disconnected. You start to experience the dimming of that living flame.
And Seth talks about physical symptoms too, right?
Oh, Seth is very clear on the physical consequences of this. When we hold back our natural energy to save it, or when we allow fear rather than trust to dictate our movements, the body's warning systems activate.
Danger signals flash.
Exactly. They manifest as sudden calamities, chronic exhaustion, depression, and very often as physical illnesses. The physical body literally loses its vitality because it's being denied its primary cellular directive to fulfill its unique value.
So how do I discern the difference? Because I know plenty of people who are exhausted, drained, and stressed, but they would tell you they are fiercely pursuing their goals. They have a massive drive to succeed.
Oh, the hustle culture mindset.
Right? They want the promotion, they want to scale their business, they want to be recognized in their field. They're pushing constantly. So how do you tell if someone is passionately pursuing their true value fulfillment, or if they are just relentlessly chasing ego ambition and cultural programming? Because on the outside, both look like intense forward momentum.
That is the million-dollar question. You have to look at the qualitative feeling of the pursuit, the internal environment of the individual.
Okay, ego ambition versus value fulfillment. What's the internal difference?
They run on completely different operating systems. Ego ambition feels urgent, heavily comparative, and inherently fearful.
Fearful, even when they seem so confident.
Especially then.
Yeah.
It carries an underlying buzzing anxiety. The internal dialogue is, I must be famous to be worthy, or I must beat my competitors to be safe.
Wow. Yeah. It's heavily dependent on the end result.
Exactly, and the external validation of others. It views the world through a lens of extreme scarcity, treating success as a zero-sum game where your victory requires someone else's defeat.
It's white-knuckling your way through life. It's the sensation of pushing a massive boulder up a steep hill because you are convinced there is a pot of gold at the top that will finally make you feel safe.
That's exactly it.
You hate the pushing, you resent the boulder, but you do it for the reward.
Precisely. You are fighting the natural contours of your own energy. But value fulfillment feels entirely different. It feels expansive, curious, and inherently joyful.
So the focus is on the process itself.
Deeply anchored in the action itself, not merely the outcome. The internal dialogue is, I love the act of writing. I will write to the best of my ability and let the outcome unfold organically.
So it's detached from the desperate need for a specific result.
Right. Now, this doesn't mean value fulfillment is just sitting on a beach sipping cocktails.
Hey.
It often involves intense, rigorous, dedicated focus. It can be exhausting in a physical sense.
But it's a clean exhaustion.
Yes. a clean exhaust.
Yeah.
It's the exhaustion of climbing a mountain simply because you absolutely love the mechanics of the climb. The feeling of the rock under your hands, the puzzle of finding the next foothold, the burn in your lungs.
You aren't doing it to plant a flag and prove you're better than the mountain.
Exactly. You're doing it because the act of climbing is a profound expression of your nature.
That is the exact distinction, and Seth is explicit about another key differentiator that separates it from ego ambition.
What's that?
True value fulfillment cannot be achieved at the expense of another's. Fulfillment structurally does not happen that way.
Oh, because of framework 2?
Exactly. Because all consciousness is interconnected at the level of framework 2, pursuing your genuine value fulfillment automatically and naturally furthers the creative potentials of everyone around you.
So it's ecologically sound.
It is a highly cooperative venture. You don't have to step on anyone's neck to reach your highest potential. If you feel you must diminish someone else to succeed, you are operating entirely from fear-based ego ambition, not the natural thrust of your value fulfillment.
This is a massive structural paradigm shift. It paints a picture of a universe that is fundamentally supportive, cooperative, and driven by joy.
It really is a beautiful system.
It suggests that health and vitality are the natural default states of the physical body when it's aligned with this internal compass.
When it's aligned, yes.
But this brings us to an incredibly tough question, a paradox that we have to confront head-on if we're going to look honestly at this source material.
I know where you're going with this.
We're talking about health, vitality, and the body's natural exuberance. But there is a fatal flaw in trying to micromanage this expansive energy with a rigid ego. And we don't have to look far to see the physical consequences of that.
We just have to look at the woman channeling the material.
Exactly. We must examine the paradox of the messenger. We have to look at the harsh, deeply uncomfortable reality of Jane Roberts' physical life.
Particularly in her later years, as documented extensively by her husband Rob in his notes, and in the book The Way Toward Health.
Right. Jane Roberts, the woman who articulated these incredibly empowering, life-affirming concepts of reality creation and bodily vitality, struggled profoundly and tragically with severe, crippling illness.
She did. It's the elephant in the room for anyone studying Seth.
I mean, while dictating dreams, evolution, and value fulfillment, she was practically immobile.
Yes, she suffered from catastrophic rheumatoid arthritis.
And an underactive thyroid that drastically reduced her energy, partial deafness, double vision, and she ultimately spent a harrowing month in the hospital dealing with all of this while developing severe, infected bed sores.
The irony is staggering.
It really is. She is verbally transmitting this cosmic material about the body's rambunctious pursuit of pleasure while her own joints are locking up and her body is shutting down. How does the listener reconcile that?
We reconcile it by understanding that Jane's life was not a failure of the material, but an intense, high-stakes lived experiment in value fulfillment.
An experiment with very real stakes.
Exactly, with all its spectacular potentials and its intrinsic human difficulties. To understand the end of her life, we have to look at how she lived before the illness took over.
Okay, take us back to her early years.
In her early years, Jane loved writing poetry. She loved exploring the fringes of consciousness. She followed that spontaneous impulse, that deep love, even when it seemed entirely impractical and eccentric in a highly materialistic, conventional 1960s society.
She wasn't trying to build a New Age empire.
No, not at all. She didn't set out to become a famous psychic phenomenon with millions of books sold. She was just following the breadcrumbs of her own curiosity.
She was following her value fulfillment.
Precisely. That curious impulse led her to her husband, Rob, an artist who shared her open-mindedness. It led them to casually experiment with a Ouija board one evening, and it ultimately led to the spontaneous emergence of the Seth personality.
She didn't chase fame or money. Fame and the massive culturally influential body of work she produced were the natural, unforced byproducts of her pursuing her unique psychological inclinations.
Exactly. The success was a byproduct, not the goal.
But then, what went wrong mechanically? If following your joy leads to vitality and the body humming along in a parasympathetic state of flow, why did her physical vehicle betray her so severely?
Because of what Seth diagnosed as the clash of selves.
The clash of selves. Okay, unpack that.
Jane was exploring territories of consciousness that were vast, unprecedented, and frankly, terrifying to the conventional ego. She was opening portals to realities that challenged every structured belief of human history.
That's an immense amount of energy to process.
An unbelievable amount. And to manage this influx of massive energy and to compensate for deep-seated beliefs of inadequacy from a very troubled childhood, Jane unconsciously constructed what Seth referred to as a superhuman self-image.
A superhuman self-image. It sounds almost like a defense mechanism.
It was entirely a defense mechanism. She felt she had to be perfect to justify the profound nature of the material she was delivering.
She felt this intense, crushing responsibility to save the world, didn't she? To have all the answers for the thousands of people writing her desperate letters, and to be the flawless conduit for this revolutionary philosophy.
Exactly. She developed a rigid belief system that demanded absolute perfection of her physical and psychological self. Seth termed this part of her psyche the sinful self.
Wait, sinful? Like in a religious sense?
Not in the traditional religious sense of committing sins against God, but in the sense that it viewed any normal human flaw, any moment of relaxation, any doubt, as a catastrophic failure.
Ah, I see. A sin against her own impossible standards.
Right. The sinful self demanded that she be an unyielding pillar of strength.
And here's where we see the mechanics of consciousness physically altering biology. The body, as Seth teaches, is the exact physical mirror of the psychological state.
It is always listening to the instructions of the conscious mind.
Always listening. So you have the spontaneous self, the channeler, the poet, the explorer, trying to bring through this massive expansive energy. And you have the conscious ego, the sinful self, terrified of losing control.
Slamming on the brakes.
Yes, demanding rigid, unmoving perfection. The biological cells are receiving entirely contradictory signals.
And the physical result of that psychological gridlock was rheumatoid arthritis. Seth revealed a fascinating, deeply tragic insight into the mechanics of her illness.
What was happening with her joints?
Jane's body literally calcified its joints, encasing itself as if in concrete, as a misguided protective measure.
Encased in concrete, my God.
The arthritis was an attempt to keep her from moving too fast, from pushing herself entirely over the edge into areas she felt consciously unequipped to handle.
So the physical immobility was the direct material manifestation of her psychological attempt to put the brakes on her own massive, frighteningly powerful creative energy.
Exactly. She was trying to manage a cosmic fire hose with the narrow rigidness of a superhuman ego, and the physical pipes burst under the pressure.
So the illness was not an external pathogen attacking her. It wasn't a punishment from the universe for getting it wrong.
No, Seth is uncompromising on this point. Illness is never a punishment from God, or all that is, or the universe.
It was her own deeply misdirected creative energy. Her ego was terrified of the vastness of her own value fulfillment, and it locked the body down to maintain a false sense of control.
Yes. It is a byproduct of the learning process. It is the result of misdirected creative energy and blocked value fulfillment. Jane had, out of fear and an overblown sense of responsibility, completely turned down her own internal thermostat.
She severed communication with the spontaneous self.
She did. And this clash of selves culminated in the hospital crucible, which is detailed in The Way Toward Health.
Yeah, reading Rob's essays and notes from that period is agonizing. It's a sensory nightmare.
It really is.
Jane is hauled from her familiar environment, dragged into ambulances, and subjected to the total loss of privacy in a sterile hospital ward. Her body shuts down further. She goes deaf. She loses her vision. It seems, to an outside observer, like the ultimate humiliating defeat of a spiritual teacher.
But Seth reframed that entire hospital experience by explaining the psychological mechanisms at play. He didn't see it as a defeat at all.
What was it then?
He said it was a desperate, highly creative, and extreme attempt by Jane's true value fulfillment to literally crack and crumble that superhuman ego image.
Wow. Her own value fulfillment orchestrated it.
Yes. The sinful self had created an image so rigid, so isolated, and so unyielding that it was literally killing her organism. The hospital experience, with all its indignities, forced her to accept help.
It forced her to be entirely vulnerable.
It shattered the illusion of superhuman independence.
Because when you are blind and deaf and relying on strangers to lift you onto a bedpan, you can no longer pretend you are a flawless deity holding the world together. The ego is obliterated.
Exactly. The hospital forced her to realize she wasn't a god who had to save everyone, but a human being who was allowed to receive care, who was allowed to be flawed, and who was part of an interconnected community.
Her spontaneous self created the extreme conditions necessary to break the dictatorship of her intellect.
That's a perfect way to phrase it.
And the most profound part of that story is that even in the midst of that intense physical suffering, her core value fulfillment never stopped.
It never wavered. She didn't just give up.
No, she dictated incredibly moving poetry from her hospital bed. She continued to receive and dictate the Seth material for the way toward health. She continued to explore the nature of her own consciousness right up until her death.
Her life remained a profound testament to the power of following one's unique impulse, even when the physical vehicle was breaking down under the weight of conflicting beliefs.
It serves as a stark, unavoidable reminder to the listener. The body is always listening. Every cell is eavesdropping on your internal dialogue.
Always. When we hold on to fear, when we demand an impossible superhuman perfection of ourselves, when we ignore our joyful impulses out of a sense of grim duty or societal expectation, the body absorbs that tension.
It physically manifests the lockdown.
It does. It encases us in concrete.
So, if the conscious ego can literally calcify the joints and shut down the senses to maintain control, how do we get it to let go? I look at Jane's struggle and I look at my own tendencies to micromanage my life, and I think, how do I avoid encasing my own life in concrete?
That is the pivotal realization.
How do I break out of the shoulds and the fear-based expectations and actually begin to trust my natural impulses?
That pivot, the shift from ego dictatorship to cellular trust, is exactly what Seth outlines in the magical approach.
The magical approach. Let's dig into that.
And it's important to clarify the terminology here. The word magical doesn't mean pulling rabbits out of hats or reciting incantations.
Right, it's not fantasy.
No, it refers to the innate, effortless, naturally provided functioning of existence. The magical approach takes it for granted that the environment and the individual are uniquely suited to work together harmoniously.
It's the radical belief that the universe isn't antagonistic.
Yes. Because we are so heavily programmed by both conventional science and traditional religion to believe that nature is a chaotic, dangerous, hostile place.
And that our own inner nature is flawed, sinful, or dangerously animalistic.
We are taught that if we don't rigidly control every aspect of our lives, everything will fall apart into absolute chaos. We are systematically taught to distrust ourselves.
But Seth argues the opposite.
Seth argues that a built-in faith is imprinted in every chromosome, every cell, and every neuron of your body. Your body fundamentally knows how to heal. Your psyche fundamentally knows how to grow and expand.
So where does the friction come from?
The friction arises when the conscious intellect decides it has to be the CEO, micromanaging every single department of the physical and psychological organism.
The intellect intensely distrusts the spontaneous self.
Intensely. It demands rigid discipline, constant worry, and endless contingency planning for every possible future disaster.
The intellect thinks, if I don't worry about my finances, I'll end up on the street. If I don't force myself to do this draining job, I have no value.
It takes on the entire burden of existence and it gets utterly exhausted. But Seth points out something so structurally obvious about human biology that we usually miss it.
It is.
The spontaneous self is the discipline of nature. He uses a brilliant mechanistic analogy to show how ridiculous the intellect's need for control actually is. Think about the simple act of walking across a room.
Okay.
When you decide to cross a room, your conscious intellect does not tell your individual muscles how to contract. You don't consciously calculate the firing of specific tendons.
Or monitor the fluid balance of your inner ear, or instruct your heart to pump slightly faster to supply the necessary oxygen.
Exactly. If the conscious intellect had to manage the biological data of taking a single step, we would be paralyzed.
We literally couldn't process the math fast enough to move an inch.
Right. You simply have the intent, the spontaneous impulse to walk across the room, and the spontaneous self, the inner consciousness of the cells, handles the incredibly complex mechanics of doing so effortlessly.
The intellect's only job is to assess the physical environment and make the decision to move. The spontaneous self executes the movement.
We already trust our spontaneous self to walk, to breathe while we sleep, to digest our food, to heal a cut on our finger. We literally couldn't exist for 5 minutes without surrendering to that spontaneous biological discipline.
So the pivot involves extending that exact same trust to the psychological events of our lives.
That's it. It means recognizing that your natural impulses, your curiosities, your sudden desire to read a specific book or call a specific friend are not dangerous distractions.
They are the language of your inner self.
They are providing your conscious mind with the exact coordinates for your value fulfillment.
I understand the theory. I really do. But if we are translating this to the listener whose alarm clock is going to ring at 6 a.m. on Monday, theory isn't enough.
Of course not. Theory evaporates under pressure.
Yeah, because when that alarm rings, the intellect leaps right back into the driver's seat, worrying about the inbox, the performance review, the bills. The fear-based sinful self takes over immediately. So how does the listener practically begin to tune into this spontaneous self and bypass the terrified intellect?
We bypass it by introducing undeniable data to the intellect. We start with a very practical tool. It's an advanced technique derived from synthesizing the core messages of these three texts.
Okay, I love a practical tool.
I call it the value fulfillment inventory. It is a way to objectively map the unseen contours of your spontaneous self.
Let's break down the mechanics of this inventory for the listener. Grab a journal or open a blank document on your laptop. What are the exact steps?
You are going to divide a page into two distinct columns. The left column is labeled activities that drain me. The right column is labeled activities that energize me.
Okay, that sounds deceptively simple.
The difficulty lies in the required honesty. You have to look at your daily life with the objective eye of a scientist. You must catalog your work tasks, your social interactions, your obligations, your hobbies, and even the micro habits of how you spend your free time.
So don't just generalize.
No, be incredibly specific. Do not write, "My job drains me," break the job down.
Right, because maybe writing the weekly status reports absolutely drains your life force, but troubleshooting a complex logistical problem with a specific colleague actually energizes you and makes time fly.
Exactly. Maybe attending large obligatory networking parties drains you, but having a deep one-on-one philosophical conversation over coffee energizes you.
Maybe scrolling social media drains you, but meticulously organizing your garage energizes you.
You are looking for the specific actions where you feel the biological shift in your energy.
And then what?
Once you have populated these columns over a few days of observation, you completely ignore the left column.
Ignore it completely.
Completely. You focus entirely on the right column. You analyze the activities that energize you, and you look for the underlying themes. What is the common denominator?
Focus the theme creativity.
Or is it fostering deep connections with others? Is it learning new complex concepts? Is it teaching or mentoring? Is it organizing chaos into recognizable order?
Is it immersing yourself in nature? Is it creating physical beauty?
You are essentially looking for the fingerprints of your own soul. You are looking for the exact ways your specific consciousness units prefer to express their tension into physical reality.
Wow, that's a beautiful way to put it.
Those themes are direct, undeniable, empirical clues to your unique value fulfillment. They are the shape of your inner self expressing itself in the physical world.
And what if the intellect pushes back?
Your intellect might argue that organizing chaotic data isn't a glamorous life purpose, but if doing it puts you in a state of energized flow, the spontaneous self is telling you that this is a coordinate for your value fulfillment.
So what's the next step once you have those themes?
Once you identify one or two core themes, you ask yourself one simple, manageable question. How can I bring a small piece of one right column activity into today?
Just a small piece. We aren't telling the intellect to panic.
Exactly. You don't have to quit your corporate accounting job, sell your house, and move to the woods to paint watercolors. That would trigger a massive counterattack from the fear-based ego.
You fly under the intellect's radar.
You just follow the impulse to integrate a tiny fraction of that specific joy into your present moment. If your theme is creating beauty, you don't need to paint a masterpiece. You just rearrange the objects on your desk so they are aesthetically pleasing.
And when you feel that impulse to act on your theme, you must act on it.
You must establish the physical habit of trusting the impulse. Because as Seth states so clearly and definitively in The Magical Approach, the spontaneous self knows exactly what to do. Trust it.
Which sets up the exact exercise we want to give the listener right now. We want to challenge you to a 24-hour implementation of this concept to prove the mechanics of it to yourself.
Yes, your challenge is concrete. Do the value fulfillment inventory today. Right after this deep dive concludes, make your two columns. Be brutal with your honesty. Extract your themes. Then, identify just one small, energizing activity derived from your right column.
Just one.
And commit to executing it this week, even if it is only for 10 minutes.
Only 10 minutes.
If your energizing theme is creativity, sketch on a napkin during your lunch break for 10 minutes. If it's connection, send a highly thoughtful, unprompted text to a friend. If it's learning, read one chapter of that dense historical biography you've been putting off. Just 10 minutes of pure, uninterrupted engagement with your theme.
I'm struggling with this a little bit. If someone is deeply stuck, If they are in a soul-crushing job to feed their family, or navigating a prolonged health crisis, or dealing with intense grief, 10 minutes of doodling on a napkin feels like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It feels trivial.
I hear that. It sounds too simple.
How does that practically change the overarching reality of their life? What are the actual cellular mechanics of this 10-minute shift?
It changes their reality because it alters the energetic signal they are broadcasting at the cellular level.
Okay, walk me through that.
When you are stuck in that soul-crushing job, your entire nervous system is locked in a sympathetic fight-or-flight state. Your sinful self is gripping the wheel, bracing for impact, telling the cells to conserve energy and lock down.
You're encased in concrete.
Exactly. But when you intentionally carve out 10 minutes to act on a joyful, spontaneous impulse, you are literally tapping into the inner channels of your psyche.
You are forcibly shifting the biological state.
You are providing physical evidence to the skeptical brain. As you do that 10-minute activity, you will notice a shift. You will notice an expansive, effortless joy, a sudden release of internal pressure.
And that feeling is not a trivial Band-Aid.
Not at all. That feeling is a biological and spiritual signal to every single cell in your body that the danger is passing. It signals that the rigid constraints of the intellect are softening. It shifts the nervous system into a parasympathetic state of flow.
By trusting that 10-minute impulse, you are proving to the terrified ego that spontaneity is actually safe.
You are turning the thermostat of your bodily vitality back up. You're reminding the body what value fulfillment actually feels like.
It's like a phase shift. The water starts to unfreeze. The momentum builds naturally because the cells want to be in that state of flow.
Exactly. You do not have to fight to trust the thrust of your own life. That thrust is always, fundamentally, at a cellular and cosmic level, meant to lead you toward your own best fulfillment.
Before we wrap up this journey, I know there was one final provocative angle on this material that you wanted to leave the listener to process.
I do. Based on everything we've explored today about the spontaneous self, the intellect's fear of losing control, and the mechanics of value fulfillment, I want you to ponder this. What if the very things you've been told are your distractions or idle daydreams are actually the precise coordinates your spontaneous self is using to point you toward your truest value fulfillment?
Alara, Level 2 has been a journey into the machinery of my own soul. I understand the architecture. I can navigate the dream state. I can trace events. But most of all, I have a compass now. Value fulfillment. I know which way to walk.
That's the gift of Level 2, Leo. You've moved from knowing you create your reality to understanding how and to feeling the inner guidance that shows you what to create. In Level 3, we'll explore the very foundations, consciousness units, the origin of matter, and the cosmic self. But for now, trust your joy. Follow your impulses. You are on your path.
Until next time, trust the spontaneous self and keep diving deep.